May I kindly ask the panelists for agriculture to take their seats before we invite the Deputy Minister of Agriculture, Food and Agriculture, to give his introductory keynote. This is just to save a little bit of time between the two sessions, the local session and the joint session. The joint session comes first. So as soon as Berlin is ready, I'll invite Honourable George Udro, who is the Deputy Minister of Food and Agriculture responsible for horticulture, to give a 5-minute keynote, introductory keynote, and will then allow 5 minutes for Q&A. This is going to be very tight. We don't have much time, but maybe we could take 2 or 3 questions on either side. So be prepared for that. Before we move into the panel discussion, which is a local discussion, and we'll have more time for Q&A then too. But it is going to be quite tight.
So if you're waiting for Berlin, Berlin is ready.
Berlin is ready?
Yes.
Wonderful. So may I now invite Honourable George Udro, Deputy Minister of Food and Agriculture, responsible for horticulture, to give us the introductory keynote.
Thank you. Distinguished participants of this forum, the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and pleasure to be invited to this special investors forum, which provides the opportunity for Ghana to share with participants of this forum investment opportunities in the agricultural space. I commend the organizers for organizing this event, which offers a platform for mutual dialogue on investment opportunities for our two countries. It is also worth noting that this is organized under the aegis of the G20 Compact with Africa, which seeks to promote private sector-led development. The government of Ghana since 2017, under the Coordinated Program for Social and Economic Development, Policies 2017 to 2024, embarked on an agenda to create sustainable jobs. It goes without saying that this agenda has to be driven by the private sector with support from the public sector through the enabling environment. It is in this light that the government designed several interrelated programs in various sectors of the economy, including reformation of the public sector. The agricultural sector is still a key vehicle in the development of the Ghanaian economy. It employs 45% of the workforce and contributes about 18.3% to the gross domestic product. We are happy to report that the sector, which has been growing at an average rate of 3.5% for the past 5 years, has seen a jump to 8.4% of the year 2017. The priorities in the agricultural sector have focused on creating efficient production systems that would open opportunities for increased investment in all aspects of the agricultural value chain. We are doing this through a number of flagship programs. This includes the Planting for Food and Jobs campaign, which focuses on provision of critical inputs, marketing and extension services for selected food commodities. One district, one factory, which has strong focus on the value addition of agricultural commodities and our joint effort to increase value added for many commodities. One district, one warehouse, with the aim of increasing storage space for increased production. One village, one dime, for increased access to irrigation, planting for export and rural development, for production and processing of selected tree crops for export and income diversification, green village production system for horticulture promotion under greenhouses, railing for food and jobs, yet to be launched next year to promote livestock and poultry. There are other initiatives being pursued to create an enabling environment, such as the Ghana Incentive-Based Risk-Sharing Agricultural Lending Scheme for enhancing access to finance by private sector operators in agriculture through loan guarantees and insurance facilities. Improved coordination among various government agencies to provide necessary information and support to potential agribusiness investors. Investment under development cooperation arrangement with development partners to provide infrastructure and other agricultural services. The establishment of a regulatory authority to tree crops such as rubber, oil palm, and cashew. Arrangements to strengthen agribusiness investment promotion and public-private partnership. Promotion of mechanization to reduce drudging in agriculture. Under all these initiatives, the private sector is a fulcrum. For example, under the planting for food and jobs activities such as supply and input of inputs, production, transport logistics, purchasing and marketing, warehousing and processing are all being done by private sector with government facilitating. In pursuit of private sector investment, we have recorded interest by some private sector operators to invest in the production and processing of sugarcane and rice, fertilizer and the manufacturing and assembling of agricultural machinery. Existing agribusinesses are taking advantage of the current climate to scale up their activities. In conclusion, the time is ripe to invest in Ghana's agricultural sector, as expressed by previous speakers. The government's commitment to support growth of agribusinesses in particular is unquestionable. Our doors are open to potential investors, and we are ready to dialogue and offer assistance where needed. I would like the panelists to focus on how public sector can be more responsive to the needs of the private sector and how small and medium-scale agribusiness can be supported to grow on a sustainable basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister has kindly agreed to take 5 minutes of questions. So should we take some on the Berlin side, 2 on the Berlin side, and 2 on this side?
Any questions?
Berlin, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we're just seeing if we have any questions in the room.
Good. All right.
Yes, there is one. Please introduce yourself. Can somebody give the gentleman a microphone? Okay, the microphone is coming.
Charles Yanka from Berlin, German, African Cultural Institute. I would like to ask the Honorable Minister about the mechanization of agriculture. How is it going to be implemented, especially affordable for farmers to mechanize their agriculture programs? Do they have any sort of incentives which could improve their production?
Thank you. The government is importing some agricultural machinery, including tractors from Brazil and the Czech Republic. We are going to establish agricultural mechanization centers across the country to be rendering services to the farmers at the rate which is going to be supervised by the government, the ministry. So the rate, you should make sure the rate is affordable for the farmers to access these facilities to enable them to increase their yield. Thank you.
There's one more question from Berlin.
From Berlin.
No, sorry, there were no more questions. Oh, there's one in the back, please. The gentleman in the back. Can somebody please give the microphone to the gentleman in the back?
This is Colin Baffo, HP Consult, Bad Berka, Germany. With regard to the facility that Professor Janka just asked, my additional question would be, is there any way that the government is going to give guarantee for the financiers who are coming from Czech Republic or from Brazilian?
Thank you. This facility I'm talking about has been there already. It's an existing facility which we inherited as a government. In fact, about 30% of the tractors from Brazil has already been supplied. It was a loan facility the government took between these two countries. So it's an ongoing facility which is going on, and the government issued a guarantee to back these facilities. So this process is an ongoing facility which we are trying to expand to enable the farmers to render this, for the farmers to access these facilities. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Michael. I would like to know what are the criteria for one to access this particular facility as a farmer? And secondly, what are the maintenance policies that you'll be bringing out for those going for this facility?
Thank you. These mechanization centers are going to be owned privately. It's going to be a private sector-driven facility because we've done this for the past, giving credit to farmers in this country. And there's an idea of anything coming from the government is free. That has been the system. That is why we've been always making a loss at this sector. So this time around, it is going to be a private sector driven. The maintenance and everything is going to be done by the owner who is owning the mechanization center within that. So the fee they are going to charge is where the government is going to sit down with the operators and make sure the fees are accessible to the farmers, not to overcharge them for them not to access their services. So this time around is purely private sector operating. Thank you.
So my name is Emmanuel. Hello, my name is Emmanuel, and I have just two questions. My first question has to do with the value chain, along the value chain when it comes to agro processing. Are we considering mechanisms or structures for processing of the products we're going to produce? Or we are just going, as the minister said earlier, send back the raw materials and then we expect finished products, or we are going to factor in the processing along the value chain? And my second question is, if we have a lot of this partnership ongoing, how are we sure that it's not going to cramp up the subsistence or the petty farmers that are trying to catch up with the market? Are we going to have ways that these micro farms can also
So, are we going to bring Accra back or no? Okay, they've run out of time. Okay, so then I think we can continue this conversation back in the room and focus on agribusiness after what we've just heard from the minister. So my name is Tanya Lozansky. I run IFC's advisory business for manufacturing, agribusiness, and services. We have, I think, a set of very interesting panelists here who are actively looking at the sector in Ghana. So just recapping what we heard earlier today, agribusiness, we heard, is still a very large sector in the Ghanaian economy. I think we heard it was almost 20% of the GDP still. It still employs a very large share of the population. And the good news is that the sector is growing. If I can just throw some additional numbers into the discussion, we know that food exports from Ghana are already almost a $4 billion business. And we know that as the country is growing and the middle income class expands, there's more demand also for imported foods. And our projections are basically saying that in the next 20 years, Ghana's food imports will have to increase four times in order to meet the local demand. At the same time, we also heard today about the improving enabling environment, the political stability, the great incentives that the government is placing for investors. So it sounds like a lot of the right factors are in place to really help Ghana become a regional hub for producing food. We heard about manufacturing hub, we heard about a potential business hub. So I think the purpose of this panel is to explore what would it take for Ghana to actually become a regional food producing hub, both to satisfy its own growing demands, but also to continue to build its export business, and specifically what role the German companies can play in this agenda. So, Christian, I would like to start with you. So Christian Hiller von Kartingen is a partner and founder of Africa Partners, and I think he's already famous because this morning, quite a few times, we made reference to his book, Africa, the New Asia, and now we have him on stage. So perhaps you can reflect from your experience. Obviously, you're an optimist about where Africa and Ghana is going. You also spend a lot of your time promoting investment in Ghana by European companies and by German companies. How are German investors, specifically in the agribusiness sector, thinking about Ghana today? Are they hearing the story, or what are they missing?
Yes, you know, the big challenge for Ghana will be to produce more food, enough food for a growing population, but most of all, also healthy food, diversified food, and secured food. And for this, I have good news for you concerning the German economy and bad news. So the bad news is that Germany does not have a global food industry. Most of German companies in the food producing sector are very Germany focused. So we have Nestle, but it's Swiss. It has been founded by a German, Mr. Nestle, but it's a Swiss company. We have Danone in Europe, it's French. InBev is a brewing company, it's Belgian. So even the German beer industry is known in the whole world and renowned in the whole world. You will hardly find a beer outside of Germany, German beer outside of Germany. So German food producers do not invest abroad, and so they do not invest in Ghana either. The good news is, first of all, we have a very high-performing educational sector for the agribusiness sector. So we train a lot of agronomists, engineers, and so on, for horticulture, for traditional farming, for forestry, and so on. And they hardly find enough jobs in Germany. So they all look outside of Germany for finding a job. So if there are investors who want to invest in Ghana, it's worth a look at German experts for running or for enhancing the investments in Ghana. And the other big advantage of the German economy is our traditional strength is mechanical engineering, and there are a lot of medium-sized companies specialized in all areas of the agricultural business. So they are producing plows, irrigation system, soil cultivation systems, tractors, harvesters, and so on. And perhaps Ghana can attract some of them for a regional hub for serving the other West African markets. So in the traditional, in the farming sector, in a very restrained sense, it will be difficult to attract German companies. But if you take mechanical engineering, fertilizers, all the sectors around agriculture, there are huge opportunities.
Thank you for that overview, Christian. So it's very interesting because we just heard about the new mechanization initiative that the government is taking, and they're working with Brazil and Czech Republic. Somehow Germany is not yet on the map, but hopefully we can start to change that. So let me go to Lothar. Lothar Jakob, he's the managing director of Steinbei's consulting sector for impact investors. And he spent a lot of time in Africa, specifically working with smallholder farmers. So what has been your experience? How can we actually help smallholder farmers in Ghana become more competitive? And what do you make of this new mechanization initiative that we just heard about?
Thank you, Tanya. Let me start by really emphasizing that I'm passionate about smallholder farmers. And I brought some pictures with me. I don't know if it's possible to display them on the screen, from a trip that we did with a private impact investor to a village called Congo, close to Bolgatanga, in the very north of Ghana, close to the border with Burkina Faso, to meet with smallholder producers. Yes, they're there. Smallholder producers, all of them women, 50 women. We had a fantastic meeting under a huge mango tree for the whole day to really understand the issues. And I want to talk about two aspects: access to markets and access to finance. So what we like to do with our clients, our impact investors, is to work on business models that give access to the smallholder farmers to markets. When you look at such inclusive supply chain models like aggregators, the question is whether these supply chains are targeting at the domestic market or for exports. Why? Because if we go there with an international foreign direct investor, he gives money, he provides money, financing in hard currency, and he wants to get paid back in hard currency, which domestic supply chains cannot generate. So that's why if you talk to foreign investors, usually they will say, either I don't do the investment, sorry, or they roll off the currency exchange risk to the investee, which I believe is not fair. Then you start looking around, looking for TCX as a currency risk mitigation mechanism. TCX only works if a development finance institution is a member of the game. Then you look at MFX, you discover that MFX runs a quite comprehensive due diligence process, which takes quite a lot of time, and is also expensive. So you end up either doing the investment, rolling off the currency exchange risk to the investee, or not doing it. And we have a German risk mitigation facility called Euler Hermes, but it's rather looking at political risk. Now, I think that today we can all agree here that political risk is not the prevailing risk in Ghana anymore. But maybe we can do something by expanding Euler Hermes to also covering the currency exchange risk. And then there's another risk that needs to be addressed, the business risk, the credit default risk. In this regard, I would have a very specific recommendation. There's a credit default risk mitigation agency called Africa Trade Insurance Agency, based in Nairobi. Fantastic team, and financed by a large number of states. Only that Germany and Ghana both are not members of ATI. So what I would recommend that Germany and Ghana join the ATI, and since PricewaterhouseCoopers in Germany runs the Euler Hermes program, but has also a seconded desk at ATI, it would be very easy to install a liaison desk at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Germany as an access point for German investors who want to do business in agriculture in Ghana and get access to the credit default risk through ATI. That would be a very specific recommendation from my side. Yeah.
Now, thanks a lot, Lothar, for that.
Another very simple thing, I hope so, it's a simple thing to get it fixed. What I would be happy to see is that in the future it will be possible to get the visa upon arrival at the airport. It makes life much easier.
Yeah. Okay, we got that. Visa upon arrival, and then the insurance. So sticking to the whole question of mitigating risks, it's great that we have with us here Nabil Fawaz, who's actually the agriculture sector manager for MIGA, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, as part of the World Bank Group. So Nabil, you've led transactions all over the world. You've led transactions in Africa. What is your take? What are some of the key emerging risks from what you heard about Ghana today, and how can MIGA help investors?
Thank you, Tanya. And also, to second Lothar on on his recommendations. Just briefly to tell you a little bit about MIGA, because that's really the area that we are working in, which is the de-risking transactions and trying to encourage investors to move forward on their investment schemes when they have identified one, but they are concerned in the country about certain risks. And MIGA is a member of the World Bank Group. Basically, we are trying to complement the services that the World Bank is providing. You have the World Bank giving advice to governments, IFC doing the financing, and technical advisory services also, and then MIGA comes in to help the private sector in moving forward with the investments. But instead of giving money, what we do is basically ensuring these investors against the non-commercial risks that the investors may have in the country. And the non-commercial risk that certain investors may be facing could be the risk of the investment climate. They are concerned about the inability to take their money outside of the country, their foreign exchange, to pay back their debts or dividends earning streams. It could be the inability to convert the local currency into foreign exchange to send outside the country. And MIGA could cover these type of risks. Unfortunately, to Lothar's concern, is the devaluation risk or depreciation of the currency risk is a risk that I am not aware of an insurance company that may be offering it. If it is offered, it's usually quite expensive. The best way to deal with it has been with an hedging mechanism. Now, if there are government and certain government institutions and certain facilities that may be done for that specific purpose, then you may have access to that type of depreciation or devaluation risk. The third type of risk that we do also provide cover against is the risk of breach of contract. And that's when the government is acting in a commercial capacity with the investors, so they are either an off-taker of goods and services from that project, or they are providing goods and services in that project. So they could be leasing the land, they could be providing water agreements for the farms, and the investors may be concerned about breaches of these contractual obligations. They may decide not to give as much water, or they may decide that the lease was too cheap and they wanted to change the rate on the investors. And MIGA could cover those type of risks. And last but not least, what MIGA could also cover is the risk of war civil disturbance, any damage that could affect the project enterprise because of a war civil disturbance risk. MIGA could also compensate it. Importantly there is that MIGA covers what we call also temporary business interruption and a walk-away situation, which means in the case of war civil disturbance, when if the situation lingered and the investors, even though the assets are still okay, but they decided to abandon the assets because they could no longer operate in the country, even though the assets were not damaged, MIGA could compensate that loss. And in certain cases, if there is a temporary interruption, MIGA could compensate the loss of revenue as well as the fixed cost that they may incur during that time. Now, again, these risks are a perception, so it is not something that everyone will have that perception. Investors may be feeling okay to go with it. Some investors may be not perceiving the risks, but what they may be concerned about is the ability to secure financing. And lenders may not be willing to provide financing if they don't have this type of security mechanism on a debt in the country. And they may want to basically have the political risk insurance. And the idea here, where we are hoping to play a role, is that we are hoping to play a role by either facilitating the financing, by making the tenor slightly longer if possible, and importantly to try to reduce also the financing cost, because there is this risk is being offloaded from basically from the investors to multilateral institution. Again, to Lothar's point, I too agree that the trade insurance export insurance is very important, and definitely ATI, which is an institution it's a regional institution based in Kenya, that was set up with the help of the World Bank Group, and MIGA was part of the setting up of an operation of ATI, is also an alternative along with Hermes, as well as the private sector, just for the investors to know that the private sector is also active in this type of insurance. So you have a lot of possibilities where investors could access a risk mitigation mechanism. The main risk that we have, through my experience, that we have usually faced has been mainly the water water rights, the adequacy of water. If there is a dam, usually the environmental and social issues can be problematic. So investors always have to look at the environmental and social safeguards and mitigation measures, especially also if they're going to have different crops. So they may need the different environmental, social aspects to look at. And the land lease issues. The land, I cannot emphasize it enough, that the investors should do an analysis of the land issue, if there is any concerns on it, if there is any relocation of population, if there is anybody that has claim on the land from before. And under the lease agreement, the lease, how good is the lease in that case?
So the good news is that there are plenty of risk mitigation instruments out there. Some proactive steps could be taken by Ghana and Germany to join ATI, which would open the broader array. But then let's talk about some of the other topics like water and land. And I'm sure land was going to come up as obviously one of the key factors. And maybe, Michael, I can turn to you, because prior to your current role at EcoNext, you were actually running Active, the Africa Agribusiness Trade and Investment Fund, where you saw many investment projects in Africa in the agribusiness sector and also in Ghana. What has been your experience? What have been some of the most frequent stumbling blocks for the agribusiness projects to go ahead?
Well, in the beginning, I think it was something that Lothar mentioned, the perception here, even though it was a KfW, German government, BMZ, Deutsche Bank joint venture, which it still is, was that you couldn't invest directly in agricultural value chains. You should invest only via financial institutions. And then we know what typically happens. It's often foreign currency denominated. So we exporting our risk to Ghana, and slightly sadly, at the end of my tenure there, managing the fund, we started seeing higher electricity prices as well. So some of the local financial institutions would come and complain that without energy efficiency measures, for example, in the sawmill industry in the Volta region, they wouldn't be able to continue operating at a margin, the positive margin. So local banks would have higher defaults in their credit portfolio, given higher electricity prices in their agricultural client portfolios. And as we all know, in Africa, it's always the case. Most of the countries have the highest proportion of the population work in agriculture, but the banks' portfolios are 0 to 5, sometimes 10%. So there's a huge mismatch in financing. That's why probably all of us trying to help you with the risk mitigation. Lothar, we're trying to make access to market possible. Christian, with all kinds of businesses that go to Western Africa. In our new venture that we founded, we are setting up a utility for Africa, across Africa. What does it mean? That means that we are taking that business interruption risk as well. If you are a project finance person, you cannot take business interruption. You're waiting for your interest payment every month. So you need MIGA or other mechanisms. What we set up, in contrast, we set up a utility, just like a German Stadtwerk. And we accept like any other utility in the world, we accept the case that some location, for example, we financed a cotton ginnery in northern Ghana, north of Tamale, in the 4 Ghanaian, I think it's still 4 Ghanaian concessions for cotton. And as most of you know, Ghana Cotton Company had, I think, gone bankrupt or out of business a while back, years ago. And then it was private sector concessions. So that's a classic case where either you need the MIGA business interruption for a while, or you need a private sector company that doesn't care about a few months of delay in recuperating the payments from that cotton ginnery. But what happens always, there's thousands of farmers in northern Ghana and they cannot grow anything but cotton because of climate change, unless we establish the water infrastructure that we need, irrigation and things like that. So towards the end of my term there, we saw that access to energy and larger infrastructure became crucial for agricultural finance, access to finance, and maybe taking the diversification angle. You do it at MIGA, and we now try it at a much smaller scale in the private sector. So if we have a lot of agricultural businesses across Ghana or across Africa, the umbrella is us. Mm-hmm. We can deal with the Ghana cotton ginnery going out of business for 6 months because there is thousands of farmers that will come back to that ginnery. We all know it's going to be activated next year, next season again, which actually happened. I think the Ghanaian government gave 4 concessions, and then private sector started operating in these regions in northern Ghana. So in conclusion for that round, I would say there is a lot of interest from the German side, and maybe often a smart idea about risk diversification or foreign currency hedging. But ideally, we have the local partners in place. We have, I think, for battery systems and detached from photovoltaic and the most of the renewables equipment being brought in. We still have tariffs, if I'm correct. I looked at the ECOWAS 774 pages this morning, so you see my sweat still in my face. I think in section 70-something 3 or so, you find a lot of tariffs for materials that are relevant to hybrid systems in off-grid locations, just like the sawmill industry would be, or lots of rural agricultural businesses would be. If you look at drying, solar drying, things like that could all be done renewable. And the problem is if you bring in equipment that may be state-of-the-art, like Christian mentioned, you may still pay 20% duty and 15% VAT. Only the renewables equipment itself, like the photovoltaic module, is free of import duty. And I think it only has a 5% VAT on it. So one recommendation, in addition to what Lothar was mentioning, would probably to look at that. If you want to increase renewable shares and help local farmers operate sustainably without rolling outages or without the load shedding, look at off-grid at 20, 30 cents per kilowatt hour for diesel, even more. Renewables can even be below 20 cents now, so they can beat the Ghanaian price. And it's 100% renewable, day and night, 24/7. The technology is there. To export that into Ghana would often hit that tariff that I mentioned for certain materials. So maybe that's a follow-up discussion to have specific recommendations on.
No, that's, I think, a very, Walter, you want to come in?
There are German suppliers providing this technology.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, there you go.
Several.
Yeah.
We have another practical recommendation, and of course the question of energy is equally important if you're trying to build an agri-processing business, which I think is what the aspiration of the government is.
I believe.
Because Ghana's energy costs are still very, very high. So clearly this is a very useful recommendation. So in the few minutes that we have left before we join up with Accra, maybe we can go around and say, what else do you think could be done to turn Ghana into a agri-food processing hub, both for its own needs, but also for exports? What else should we be putting on the agenda, either on the German side or on the Ghana side? Christian?
On the Ghana side, it's clearly a lack of infrastructure, a lack of cold chain and storage, and a lack of food processing. And that makes it difficult for foreign investors to invest in Ghanaian agriculture, because agricultural projects in general are labor intensive and not capital intensive. So take an avocado farm. You have 200 hectares, you plant over 5 years your avocado plants, seeds from, let's say, from Spain, high quality plants. You have a $13 to $15 million investment. So that's an investment many foreign investors do not look at. It's not worth the due diligence and to consider it and so on. However, if you can join to this investment a processing facility, because on an avocado farm you always have avocado fruits that you cannot sell on the market. So if you have a processing facility, you can use the avocados who are not well grown or who are that have some defaults. You can transform them into paste or something like that for the cosmetic industry and so on. And this way you can create value added that will help to develop the Ghanaian farming sector.
And why do you think this is not happening today?
One reason is trade policy. We have very unfair conditions on the agricultural international markets. We are renegotiating now the Cotonou Agreement that is regulating, that is ruling the relationship between Europe and Africa. And we need fairer conditions, because a Cotonou Agreement means that Africans have to open their markets to European products. So if we have a surplus in chicken or something like that, we sell it at low prices on the African market, and that makes it very difficult for African countries to build up a poultry industry. So the Cotonou Agreement is currently under negotiation, and it has to be one of the main objectives of a new Cotonou agreement, to have fairer market conditions.
That's a super important point, and I hope that we're noting this also for the recommendations that are going to be coming out of this session to be taken up in a few weeks when this discussion is back on the table. So we have a few minutes. I'd like to hear from each of you more on this topic. Right? What else would it take to turn Ghana into a regional processing hub for West Africa? Anything that you haven't yet mentioned?
Not mentioned, not really. It's just a reiteration. Definitely infrastructure is very important. And importantly, also thinking of export, let's think of regional exports, not that we have to cross seas. We can be in the region and the countries. And unfortunately, the customs between the countries are an impediment. So there is even a regional harmonization of customs need to be done. So if they can push the production outside of Ghana, and I totally agree with Christian. The agro-processing, the value added need to be improved. Instead of just providing raw material to send out of the country and bring it back finished, is try to at least to reach semi-finished goods state within Ghana.
Thanks, Nabil. Walter, Michael?
Yes, I maybe have another suggestion. There's a Ghana Investment Promotion Center in place, and I noticed that the director is also going to be in the forum later on today. And what would be enhancing in order to get connected to Ghanaian entrepreneurs in agribusiness would be maybe be a decentralized, have a structure of decentralized offices, investment promotion offices, not just in Accra, because in Accra you don't grow maize and you don't grow tomatoes. You have to go to the north. So maybe have sub-regional centers in Tamale or in Kumasi or even further in the north as an access point for entrepreneurs to get connected to foreign direct investors who come to the field and want to meet those people, and create a kind of a matchmaking exercise on the sub-regional level in the country. Yeah.
Very practical suggestion. Thank you, Lothar. And Michael, I think you might have the last word here.
Oh my gosh, 2 minutes. So the same reiteration, one thing that I read was there's still too many business partners that you have to deal with in Ghana on the public sector side when you want to establish a business. So the one-stop shop comes up in the literature. I think Irina wrote about it in 2015, the International Renewable Energy Agency, that for power projects you still have 4 or 5 government agencies to go to, including the promotion agency, Ministry of Power and others. So there could be, again, the typical recommendations. I think it's a global one. Reduce the red tape for foreign investors, and but I'm totally with Christian, Lothar, Nabil. Increase the local value add. Even if the foreigners are providing capital, it would be fantastic to see the imports. I think tomato paste imports in Africa of 300,000 tons a year, and nowhere can tomato be grown better than in Southern Africa and Western Africa. So these kind of promotions of local investments would totally help.
Great. Please join me in thanking our panel, and we're going to make a switch with the panelists. For those for the Joint Africa panel, please come up. So thank you, Nabil, Michael, Lothar, Christian. Thank you.
Berlin for joint discussion on agriculture, moderated by Tanya Lozansky, who is the Senior Manager responsible for agribusiness at IFC in Nairobi.
Yes, hello everybody. Can you hear us, Accra?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Great. So welcome back to the joint discussion. With us on this continuation of the joint panel from the Accra side, we have Catherine Krobo-Eduse, who is the founder and managing director of Eden Tree Limited. We also have Kenneth Corty, who is the managing director of Sidals Limited, a poultry company. And then here with me on stage, we have Hans Thomas Kessler, who's a partner in Herbert Smith and Freehills. We have Hans-Peter Landkees, who's the Vice President in IFC for Economics and Private Sector Development. And we also have Franziska Holman, who is the Director for Corporates in Africa in DAG. So I think maybe first what we can do is bring a little bit of the conversation from both sides of the world into the room. And I'm going to ask you, Catherine, to perhaps summarize your 2 or 3 takeaways from the discussion that you just had in Accra. And maybe recognizing that you are yourself already running a successful business in the horticulture sector in Ghana, if you wanted to add any additional perspectives of your wish list for what could Ghana do to really grow successfully into a regional agribusiness hub for Africa. Catherine.
My takeaway mainly is that it is important that we add value to agribusiness, which means that we need to increase processing and not export our raw produce indefinitely. So there are opportunities here in Ghana with small-scale industries that need investments. And if we can come together, we need partners who are in the same industry, who will bring their expertise to join force with us so that we can actually come together and then succeed. For example, earlier on, I used a company which is Blue Skies. They have been successful at exporting cut fruits. They've added value to the fruits, and they've been exporting to Europe for some time now. And I think we need more industries like that so that the agribusiness can move forward rather than just export our raw produce.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Kenneth, would you like to add something? You're also running a successful business in Ghana, so would you like to add anything from your side?
Well, I think, it's quite obvious that in many of the industries in the agricultural sector, we're always looking at the challenge of small-scale operators. I am one who doesn't believe you necessarily need to turn them all into large-scale producers to provide the raw materials that are needed. I think the problem is more to do with aggregation, which is that the farmers are small scale, but they're also so spread out, doing different. You go into, for example, you go into the north, and you have a farmer who's producing corn right next to a farmer who's producing groundnuts, and then the next farmer who's producing groundnuts, if that's what you want, is miles away. So when people go into aggregation, they have a massive transport problem getting the volumes you need for the scale to go into agro-processing. I think eventually they will become large-scale commercial farmers, but I don't think that it's necessary to turn them all into large-scale commercial farmers to get the volumes you need for the agro-processing industry immediately. We can grow the small-scale farmers into those large-scale farmers in an organic manner. And so I suppose the focus for me, I think the investment opportunities in Ghana are still in the agro-processing sector, because if we get the agro-processing sector going, they are the ones who are going to drive the scaling up of the production that we try to foster here in Ghana.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Kenneth, for summarizing some of the discussions you had in Accra. I think the discussion here was very similar. We also focused on processing. Everybody agrees that Ghana has a lot of potential to become the regional agribusiness hub, not just only for itself, but for West Africa, and to continue to grow its export business. But from the point of view of the German side, some of the things that were flagged here included improved access to energy, both for the smallholder farmers, many of whom are off-grid, but also to build the agri-processing sector, we need to bring prices of energy down in order for that sector to be competitive. We also focused on additional instruments for insurance and risk mitigation, whether it's political risk or business risk. And we also talked about how some of the German expertise, especially, the minister mentioned mechanization, could really fit quite well in terms of the development and improvement of productivity in Ghana's sector. So that's just to give you a flavor of the conversation that we had here. But I'd like to now turn to Hans-Peter. Hans-Peter, under your leadership, IFC recently completed a deep dive strategically into the agribusiness sector in Ghana. Maybe you can summarize a few takeaways from that exercise.
Thank you, Tanya, and really thanks for having me here. I'm going to do a little publicity for these country private sector diagnostics, which we have been producing, which is what Tanya is referring to. We're doing this now also under the umbrella of the Compact with Africa. It's an attempt to take a bottom-up perspective on different sectors in African countries in which we and investors that we work with perceive to be potential that is underexploited. And these are sectors where, by design, by our methodology, we try to find sectors in which we can get over the finish line within the medium term, where the problems are not very long-term and structural, but where there is investment potential, and through some action upstream in the policy area or in capacity building, we may be able to get over that finish line. In the agribusiness sector, which is one of the three that we identified and discussed in Ghana, in the agribusiness sector, we see very significant underexploited potential based on land, water availability conditions in Ghana, but also on Ghana's relative geographic proximity to European markets. For instance, when you compare with Kenya, high-value horticultural from Ghana can go to European markets by fast boat. From Kenya, they have to be flown in. That's a 25% cost advantage, which Ghana can exploit. And there are some companies that are beginning to do so. So Blue Sky, we just heard, is one of those companies. VegPro is another one, which is supported by IFC and USAID. I had the privilege of visiting VegPro's facilities 2 hours from Accra. What you find is that there is very fertile, well-irrigated land. You can bring your produce. In this case, it's baby corn. You can bring those produce fairly quickly to the relevant logistics facilities and ship it off to Europe. They're working with an outgrower model, and I think that's true for Blue Skies as well, where smallholders produce for the company. So that's a fairly flexible model. It's a bit like outsourcing in manufacturing. Now, a key constraint that we see and that this diagnostic identifies across Ghana is land. It's been referred to several times. Partly it's the overlapping formal and customary rights that create complications in the land area. So how can you address land? That is an issue where AgDevCo, for instance, is a company that's an aggregator of land. We know that DFID has been supporting land, and we at World Bank IFC are trying to get into that kind of support as well. How can we create land banks that become available for investors without all the complications?
So overall, Hans-Peter, if I can summarize, the IFC and the World Bank Group are also quite optimistic on Ghana's potential. There are some barriers that are still holding back investment, but collectively, it's nothing that can't be addressed. The economic potential is there, and the competitiveness is quite clear. So, Francisca, maybe I can turn to you. I mean, in the last session, we heard that German food processing companies are maybe not very active overseas investors in general, but Germany has a lot of other potential that it could bring to Ghana, including in the area of skills, of agronomy, and also especially in the area of machinery. So you've been looking at these investments for many years in Africa. Maybe you can share your perspective on what's holding back German investors and what can we do to actually scale up this type of investment in Ghana?
Thank you, Tanya. Well, it's difficult at this moment in time not to repeat what already has been said in this morning. So all aspects are really relevant. We heard about the large German companies, the DAX companies, which are active, and the financing instruments, risk-sharing instruments. Dr. Liebing said we need more of this. I think there's a lot available in MIGA, India, in long-term financing provided by KfW, by DEG, by IFC. So I think that is should not be a bottleneck. In terms of, with respect to the so-called German Mittelstand, represented today by Mr. Bude from Drechselmeier, I think there it's worth it to spend some words on, what is the philosophy and what is the culture of German Mittelstand, and why don't they invest so easily abroad? I mean, we have heard about why Germany's economy is running very well. But one aspect hasn't mentioned yet, and these are the cultural differences. I mean, we hear also from our African companies who are our clients, DEG's clients, that they complain about finding the right partners, that it's difficult to team up with German companies. They're so demanding. They have very high and strict requirements, and every decision takes a long time. But I would like to make a little bit of advertisement and try to improve the understanding, the mutual understanding for the different culture, because German companies. And maybe it's a bit German culture. We analyze thoroughly, we analyze the risks and the chances. And once we take a decision, it might take some time, but then we are looking for long-term partner, long-term view, long-term investment. And once we took a decision, or German companies took a decision, they don't change it so easily. So there is a chance to find a very good and long-term partnership between Ghana and between Ghana and Germany. And from the German side, the German companies should change their perspective from only analyzing the risks into also seeing the chances of dealing with a young population, with a very innovative country, with the chances of maybe being a little bit behind the technology. It's like moving from mobile phone to, or from no phone at all to mobile phone. And now what we see are really high-tech investments in modern mobile data systems, for example. So I think there are many chances in the technology sector for German Ghanaian cooperation. And of course, we need the support from the Ghanaian government in all these aspects which have been mentioned already, in land rights, in stability, in water rights, etc. So, change a little bit the perspective and try to understand each other better and start cooperating.
So a call for action also for the German companies.
For all.
They're great long-term partners to change a little bit their perspective on how they see opportunities in Ghana. So excellent. Thanks, Francisca. Hans Thomas, maybe I can turn to you. I mean, a lot has been said about legal stability, the rule of law. You're in this profession, so when you're looking at your firm's experience in Africa and in Ghana, what have been some of the major challenges? And would you also have suggestions for the regulatory agenda to help it easier for your clients to invest in Ghana?
I think what Francisca just mentioned is really important to understand restrictions, limitations imposed or characterizing the other side. If you look at European investors, whether that is Mittelstand and medium-sized companies or institutional capital, Mittelstand is of course influenced by experience, by cultural background, by probably conservative, careful consideration of business opportunities, which is on the one hand sometimes burdensome, on the other hand probably an advantage and a quality of German investors. If you look at institutional investors, and one should not underestimate the strength of German institutional investors globally. We have insurance companies, pension funds, high net worth individuals who apply institutional criteria to investing in foreign countries. And if you want to attract and mobilize such capital, whether medium-sized company capital and investment or institutional investment, you need to understand what actually drives them, what limits them, what restricts them. And the rule of law is, of course, one important aspect. And if you look back into the 90s, for example, there were some big institutional investors from Europe who pursued a developing market strategy at the time. And many of them actually pulled back and pulled out of that strategy. And then over a long time, we haven't seen them really as very active, strong investors. That is currently changing. That is a big opportunity, I think, for Africa at the moment, because regulation is also driving institutional investors into what I would call impact financing and sustainable financing or investment. And regulation very clearly motivates institutional investors globally to look at opportunities in kind of developing countries, in Africa and other places, and they are going to do that. And with a view to attract them, I think there are a few points that an African country, an African regulator, legislator, but also an African businessman or woman should consider. They are European investors driven by regulation. There are certain points that they need to kind of comply with. Compliance is one point. Compliance is not only corruption and other points, but it's also, of course, land grabbing. You will not find an institutional investor taking a reputational risk investing into an agricultural scheme. You need to package an investment opportunity in such a way that investors and their capital providers feel good about it. And I think that is an important aspect. Structuring investments in a way that international institutional investors feels comfortable. And there you need, of course, professional advice, you need experience, you need to understand the other side. In that respect, I think it is not so difficult to actually do it because at the same time, still given the strict requirements they have to pursue, there is also a lack of such products and such projects. And of course, institutional investors will take a very positive view and try to be considerate when analyzing such a project, investment opportunity, and they will try their best. And therefore, what Francisca said, understanding each other is really important to analyze the limits, restrictions upon the other side, and then trying to structure a project in such a way that it works. I think that is what our firm has been trying to do now over many years, and that what we experience in many countries.
So maybe just one follow-up question to you, and then we will actually start taking questions from the audience. So please start thinking about your questions. But Hans Thomas, in the last session, very briefly, this whole question of regional trade came up. And the fact that if Ghana aspires to be not just a hub for itself, but also for regional trade, that there are some still regulatory and transactional bottlenecks to moving goods across borders and logistics. Do you have any specific views on this topic or recommendations that we could also put on the table?
I think agriculture globally is a highly regulated industry, given its social dimension and importance for nearly every country. If you look at the EU, I mean, we cannot blame Africa for having trade barriers, given our own history and what we apply in our free market, which is, of course, highly regulated and protective. I did my PhD on NAFTA, and in North America, for example, the North American Free Trade Agreement, agriculture was one of the hottest topics because it got such a political and social dimension. So I think with regard to trade barriers, tariff and non-tariff, one should approach it, but one should also be realistic. It will take time. And usually those countries pushing it hard are those countries who can afford it best. And that is not different like in Europe, actually, than in Europe. I think it will take time, and one should not be kind of overly optimistic about kind of quick results there. It is an ongoing theme which will need constant attention by politicians and administrators, but that is not the quick solution. That's very clear, in my view.
Not a quick solution, but clearly one that needs to be put on the table.
Every day.
So why don't we open it up to questions, and perhaps we can go to Accra first. And if you could also introduce yourself, if you have a question to a specific speaker, please let us know. Otherwise, the best position will answer.
So I'm Emmanuel, and I want to ask a question. With regards to the understanding each other's needs and coming to a consensus, in your opinion, do you think that, which of the two do you think would have to make the first move? Is it the investor coming in or the Ghanaian moving out? Which of these two parties is supposed to make the first move? And the second question will have to do with the climate change issues in Africa in recent times. How would that be a standing block for an investor trying to invest in Ghana? Looking at how stringent the Germans are with analyzing risk.
Thanks for the question. So who would like to start? Franziska? All right, go ahead.
Okay. Well, who makes the first move? I mean, this pretty much depends on who has the strongest interest. Whether an investor goes to Ghana and seeks for partners, then he is taking the first step. And if a Ghanaian company entrepreneur is looking for a good partner in Germany, then of course, the initiative should come from this party. I think we shouldn't think about it whether it's the one or the other making the first movement into the other direction. It's just, we move together. We want to cooperate, and there are platforms, there are initiatives like this conference, like the Compact with Africa initiative. So let's take the opportunity and simply reach out and look for partners, whoever needs them.
Thanks, Franziska. Fully agree with you. Does anybody want to take the question of climate change? Actually, maybe we should hear from Catherine or Kenneth first. Do you already feel that climate change is affecting how you operate your business in Ghana?
Definitely, climate change is making the sun hotter and hotter during the dry seasons, and when that happens, it actually lowers our yields, and it creates a problem for us. However, again, I think technology will be what can reduce that factor, and so therefore we need expertise in that field as to how to manage the climate change, if there is actually a way in which that can be managed, as it is global. When it comes to, I'd also like to add on, for the German investors to not be so comfortable regarding regulations and their risks. I think our government has recognized the fact that processing is the way to go. So maybe it is time that they take a second look at Ghana, because even our cocoa, it's like we are now realizing that we need to start producing the chocolates here rather than just be sending the cocoa beans out for the chocolates to be done. So the government, they're coming together, they're creating land banks, they are creating opportunities that will make it easier for investors to come in. So I think they should take a second look.
Thanks, Catherine. Right. Kenneth, would you like to add?
Well, not really to the question you posed, but if I can, I would like to ask a question of the last speaker out there, which was, I got a sense that the gentleman was, I'm trying to remember the name, but
Hans Thomas.
He spoke about how, yes, I got a sense that he spoke to an issue which we've been grappling with for several years about regulations in agriculture and free trade. We have been part of this stance against liberalizing the markets here to imports for several reasons, including that agriculture on the other side of the world was not subject to the principles of free trade. And I think we have suffered for it. I think it's not just that we have suffered, it's actually denied the opportunity for investors to actually come into Ghana and invest in the agricultural sector. And I believe he sort of gave me the sense that he was acknowledging that we really need to take a second look at that. I don't know if I read him right, because this is something that is very dear to my heart, and I think it needs to be resolved.
Would you like to come in? Or?
Yeah, trade liberalization, especially in agriculture, is of course something I'm supportive of. I simply believe that it will go step by step, given the kind of political and social dimension of it, and that is what I said. I think it's altogether very positive. What is currently being discussed. It's not only about tariffs, it's also about non-tariff restrictions that hinder trade to flourish. And of course, from an investment perspective, it would be extremely helpful to kind of grow the markets that a Ghanaian domestic producer can supply, and the other way around. But I believe that this is one important aspect, but one of many, and that this one aspect will take time to be resolved and to be put into something better. In Europe, it has taken 60 years or so, or longer. And in the Americas, it has taken 20 years, and it hasn't been resolved yet.
So let me turn to Hans-Peter. Perhaps you'd like to weigh in.
Yeah. Actually, I'd like to go back to the question of who moves first. It's a very interesting question. And one thing to note there is that the question of investment in Africa, the question of investment in Ghana is full of misperceptions. The large companies, large German companies, large companies anywhere, they have knowledge on the ground. But the next tier, the Mittelstand in Germany and the equivalent elsewhere, they don't have the same kind of intelligence on the ground. They don't have the same transparency, the perceptions. And that is causing major obstacles. So one thing to note, is it risky to invest in Ghana? Is it risky to invest in Africa? If you look at IFC's portfolio, 60 years of investing across the region, it's a fairly healthy portfolio. We have a 4% NPL ratio, and it's not higher in Africa than it is in East Asia. Yeah? If we look at the database we have on infrastructure investment, just to take another example which is full of misperceptions, the credit quality of IFC's private infrastructure investments in Africa is higher than the average OECD private infrastructure credit quality. And in order to know that, you have to go there. You have to be interested. You have to invest in that knowledge. Now we have to help. We have to help with that step, and I think it's our institutions, Franziska, that really have a role in that. I think we also have to go and find the investors and tell them about it. We have to show them the instruments that are there. So we're all developing risk-sharing facilities, for instance. In agriculture in West Africa, we have, IFC has now set up a risk-sharing agreement, a risk pooling for banks that provide loans to smaller producers across the region. So there's a risk pool that makes it easier for them to lend into agriculture, for instance. That we hope to use these kinds of facilities to push out the boundaries. And the same is true for risk sharing in other areas. We heard that a little bit before.
Thanks, Hans-Peter. Why don't we open it up to questions now from Berlin? Are there any questions in the room?
Charles Janka. I think the German food industry should play a very important role so far as training of the farmers in Ghana are concerned. The infrastructure might be very, very low, and they have the senior expert service, the German industry, which is based in Bonn, which usually go to many developing countries to transfer their expertise and know-how. How does this play a role in this German Ghana Food Agricultural Cooperation?
Should I? Well, thank you very much for the question. And before I answer the question, just one comment on Hans-Peter. I couldn't agree more. It's same with DEG. Our African portfolio is performing better than other portfolios, other regions. And the agri portfolio in particular is performing really well. So our experience is good. So obviously the risks are manageable. They are there, but you can manage them. And what I meant in who's moving is I would like to see Ghana and German entrepreneurs and partners to talk at the same level, to be at equal footing. And that's what I mean with it doesn't matter whether we are moving or they are moving. So we have to move together. To your question, yes, the German plays an important role in training. We have several programs. You mentioned the SES. There are vocational training programs. There's a program which is called Private-Public Partnership. KfW, with its Outgoer and Value Chain Fund, trains smallholders. DEG finances or supports all its clients if they want to invest in training. So we are doing a lot, and we are trying to bring in as much as expertise as we can at the different levels, be it environmental and social aspects, but also it could be energy, resource efficiency, it could be agricultural practices. So yeah, whenever we can add value to our normal financing, we are happy to do it.
Thanks, Franziska, and thanks also for reinforcing this view that Ghana and Africa portfolio on the investment side doesn't have to be any riskier than in the rest of the world. And clearly, investors are making investments and they're doing well. So there is already a history of success. Should we go back to Accra and see if there are any more questions or comments in Ghana?
Okay, I'm Kofi Fosu from Kanuri Export Ventures. I'm into the processing of agricultural waste into high value end products like compost, pellet, and the like. And this process helps to mitigate climate change. And from what I'm reading on the internet, Germany has led the way in this industry. So my question is, to what extent can we leverage their expertise in this regard towards, because in effect we are going to kill two birds with one stone. This process of managing our agricultural waste will help reduce the negative effect of greenhouse gas emission. Then help us to grow our crops naturally. Crops grow with compost. I'm speaking from experience. I've done something in the house. And I harvested some tomatoes for 2 weeks now. They are still fresh outside the refrigerator. Thank you.
Would anybody like to tackle this question in particular? And I think maybe we can broaden it, right? We had a discussion earlier that there is a lot of German expertise specifically, not just on the climate change side, but also on renewable energy and mechanization, the initiative that was mentioned by the minister. So how can we better leverage these know-how and these technologies to help improve the productivity in Ghana? What more can we do to make that happen? Would anybody like to? Hans-Peter?
Yeah, I see. I'll take one aspect of this, and that's a general problem of scale in the renewables area, in areas like bioenergy, etc. Most of the projects that I see that get presented to IFC are relatively small, in sort of local markets. They struggle with regulatory and other issues in these local markets. And because of the small scale, it becomes quite expensive to develop them. It's very time consuming. What we need to find is solutions that are replicable, easily scalable across situations, across countries, in order to bring down simply the development costs of these kinds of energy and other solutions. We're doing that in the solar area. There's a World Bank Group approach in which we're trying to create a kind of one-stop shop for solar parks, from land acquisition to offtake agreements to the tender documentation and everything else. And that worked in Zambia for the first time. We're now doing this in Senegal, Ethiopia, Madagascar, and this is hopefully going to spread. I think these models also in the bioenergy area are what we should be looking for simply in order to bring down costs. I think we've mentioned it before. In many parts of Africa, we have a problem of market fragmentation. I think before everything else, before policy and regulatory and other problems, market fragmentation is perhaps the biggest obstacle to large-scale investment. And some of that fragmentation we can help to overcome by creating these public-private models, templates for working in these areas.
Would you like to add?
Yeah, I would like to give one example of also adapting to climate change and saving energy costs. I mean, we are talking a lot about investments in energy production, but it would also help if we save energy and water costs. And one of our clients, it's a Ghanaian food producer, dairy producer, Fan Milk is the name. They participated in a program which DEG offers for all clients, which is called Resource and Energy Efficiency Check. So we send experts to the clients, to the companies. They check the company and see where is potential to save energy, water, biomass, whatever. And they found out that in this company the energy saving potential was quite interesting. So it's not always about investing. Sometimes it's also useful to save energy in the ongoing process.
Thank you, Franziska, and thanks, Hans-Peter. So we have just a few minutes left, and I think what would be good is just to have one last closing statement from each one of our panelists. Again, taking this view of the aspiration of Ghana becoming the agribusiness hub of West Africa. What is your outlook for the next 5 years? What do you think are the one or two most important things that need to happen to realize this ambition that we heard articulated so clearly from the government? So maybe we can start here.
I think what Kenneth mentioned at the very beginning, we cannot expect every Ghanaian farmer to become a large-scale producer. I think that is going to be tackled and addressed differently. In Europe, we've seen associations globally, we've seen associations in agriculture as a common theme. I think that is one of the ways, and that is what we are going to see increasingly, also in conjunction with impact financing and impact investment, that we will try to empower the individual farmer, despite him harvesting a relatively small piece of land, and to provide thereby access to finance, to fertilizers, to technology. I think that is important, one important factor socially on the one hand, but also with a view to attract international conscious impact capital, because otherwise I think some of the large institutions, including German Mittelstand, will rather shy away. So I think to strengthen the grassroots structure, to strengthen to overcome fragmentation, whether that is by improving feeder roads and other stuff, and thereby improving transport opportunities, possibilities in regions. That is really something important, and to rather look at this as a strength and something given, but trying to improve and help the current structure to actually live up to larger scale. I think that is an important factor, and that's something that we are going to see more strongly.
Thank you. So now I think we have like 30 seconds or less for each of the remaining.
So I'm going to be a little bit boring, but the number one issue is land. The number one issue is to have consolidated, sizable land that is well serviced by water, electricity, and roads. And for that, we need public-private partnerships. We have Henri Kerali here, the director for the World Bank. They're very active now. We've had others in Ghana working on this question. Let's make a push on the land question.
Yeah, very much agree. So, Franziska?
On my wish list, there is biology and agricultural practices as part of the normal primary school education. Primary, secondary, and hopefully also vocational training. And on my a little bit more longer term wish list for Ghana, or the vision is I want to see Ghanaian products in German supermarkets, ideally the best chocolate of the world.
Hey, here's to that. So let's go to Accra, Catherine and Kenneth for closing aspirations from your side.
I'd like to say my wish list is that small-scale companies in Ghana will scale up, will grow, so that we can also have partners with the companies in Germany, so that our machinery, because to be able to move forward, we need to fix all these issues where our technology, our machinery, is up to date, and then we have a healthy trade between us. My wish list also is that the governments on the sub-Saharan continent will be able to fix the trade barriers so that we can, because there's also a huge market in Africa, but because of the trade barriers, we're also not able to tap into those opportunities. But give and take, I think the future looks good. And as you said, your African portfolio is doing well. So I don't know about Ken, but my company is available for talking to a partner in the industry to be able to help us grow. That's my wish list.
Well, since this is an investment forum, if I should call it that, I suppose the real wish is how we can foster investment from Germany in this particular case. I've had experiences with foreign investment, and I've been in discussions with several potential foreign investments. My experience has been that most of this is institutional foreign investment. And my greatest concern is that generally foreign investment is a little too impatient for agribusiness here. And I think if you even look at the great achievements in the agricultural sector achieved in most of the developed world, you will find that its success was very much dependent on much more patient money than institutional investment, for foreign institutional investment has in Africa or in Ghana in particular. Most of my experiences is that they expect things to return to an attractive enough investment that they can pull their funds out in about 5 years. I don't see it possible to do anything with foreign investment that doesn't have enough patience for a minimum of 10 years. Quite frankly, from my experience, my 35 years experience in agriculture here at this moment, I don't know if it will change in the future. So I suppose, basically, I would like to say that we do need investment, but we do need investment that is more patient. And if we can get that through direct dealings with, I forget the name you call them, the mutations, rather than institutional, rather than the institutional investments, I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Ken. And you two are also shining examples of successful businesses in Ghana that are making it. So please join me in thanking all of the panelists, both in Accra and in Berlin, for a really interesting discussion with lots of very practical recommendations for both sides, for the German side as well as for the Ghanaian side, which I hope we can summarize as one of the outcomes of this forum. Thank you very much.